Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We begin this morning with that decision by the Supreme Court. The justices will hear arguments about whether former President Donald Trump can claim presidential immunity from federal election interference charges. Now, the court is going to begin hearing oral arguments the week of April 22nd. It's unclear when the justices will actually make their final ruling in the case. In the meantime, no trial can take place. So because of that timeline, there is a very real possibility Trump could avoid facing any trial for election interference allegations before this November's election. Prosecutors in the case say that Trump conspired to obstruct Congress and overturn legitimate election results. The former president has denied any wrongdoing in the case. In a lengthy Truth Social post, he doubled down on his innocence, saying, quote, all presidents must have complete and total presidential immunity, or the authority and decisiveness of a president of the United States will be stripped and gone forever. We have NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen standing by to help us break down what this means for the election. But first, let's bring in NBC News justice reporter Ryan Riley and NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden for more on the Supreme Court's decision to actually hear this case. So, Ryan, let's start with you. Remind us what's at stake here and how did even reviewing this claim of presidential immunity make it all the way to the nation's highest court?
Yeah, I mean, really, timeline-wise, the question is now whether this case gets to trial. This is a big win for Donald Trump because really it's just all been about that timeline for him. Remember, if you look at the big picture here, his lawyers think he's going to be convicted in D.C. They don't think he can get a fair trial in D.C., and that's one of their main arguments here. They're also arguing essentially for two of the charges to be dropped because they don't believe that the proper focus of those charges, and this is the way that these charges were intended to be used in terms of the obstruction of justice charges that are being used against hundreds of January 6 rioters as well. But big picture, this is a really big win for Donald Trump because it raises the possibility that despite, according to the government, having conspired to overturn the results of a legitimate election and disenfranchise millions of American voters, he may not face legal consequences for that before we get to November. What happened here essentially is that Judge Chutkan has said overall that she would give 7 months for Donald Trump to prepare. Now, originally, this trial was set to get off very quickly. It was set to get off very shortly thereafter. March, in fact, next week is when this trial was originally set to begin. Because of this appeal, it really delayed this over a lengthy period of time. There are now 88 days left in this preparation window. So when the Supreme Court, or if the Supreme Court sort of gives the go-ahead for this trial to proceed, which now could come, months from now, it could come in May or June, that's when that timeline would begin, according to Chutkan's previous ruling. So then the 88 days start. So what that means is that ultimately this trial would then not be able to begin until perhaps late August, perhaps early September, and that's very quickly getting into that window where it would just overlap with the election, and the trial would not be over, and the verdict would not be out before November.
Kristen, what are some of the arguments that the justices are probably going to hear from both sides?
Well, I think we can expect to hear that fundamental debate on presidential powers. So Trump's defense is going to argue that Judge Chutkan and the D.C. Circuit Court were actually wrong or erred when they recognized total immunity for his official acts as president. And he's going to probably frame this as that it is essential for the separation of powers and to prevent partisan exploitation of the criminal justice system. He's going to argue that without that immunity, any presidential decision could be criminally prosecuted by a subsequent administration, which really hinders presidential functions. So Trump's team is probably also going to state, as Ryan kind of was alluded to, that any months-long trial, particularly if it's during the election season, is going to severely disrupt his campaign efforts and infringe on American voters' right to really hear his message. And I think that he's also arguing that that implicates the First Amendment. But countering that, SCOTUS is also going to hear from Special Counsel Smith, and he's going to argue that Trump's broad claim of immunity, if it's accepted, would actually be extremely dangerous because it would undermine the principles of justice, really democracy. and the rule of law, because it really would argue that no president, they're going to argue that no president really should be immune from prosecution for actions that threaten the democratic process itself. And more importantly, that no man, including the president, really should be above the law.
So, Kristen, I mean, the lower courts unanimously rejected Trump's claims when it comes to the issue of presidential immunity. There were a lot of legal analysts who thought this ruling was really narrowly written. The high court would probably leave it alone. Are you surprised the justices are taking this case?
I'm not surprised given the makeup of our court. You know, the lower court decisions, they do critically frame the debate on the presidential powers. But it's really crucial to remember that the Supreme Court's not really bound by these rulings. Instead, they're really bound or guided by their own precedent. So when you look at, you're asking me, am I surprised? When you look at the wake of decisions like Roe, there's that growing scrutiny over how steadfastly the court is really going to adhere to any of its past rulings. So I'm not surprised that they took this up. This is an impactful ruling. It's an impactful political ruling. And it's going to be the most impactful, I think, political ruling since the Bush v. Gore. And that was the ruling that really decided the election. So right now, all eyes are going to be on how they navigate their precedents in shaping the contours of presidential power and the rule of law.
All right, Ryan Riley, Kristen Gibbons-Fedden, thank you both so much. Let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen for more on the political impact here. John, good morning. So from former President Trump's perspective, how big of a win is this for him?
I mean, it couldn't be a bigger win. The biggest challenge to his election so far, or one of the biggest challenges to his election so far, has been the prospect that he would have a speedy trial, as defendants are usually entitled to in this country, and that he would be convicted of a crime. Now what you've got, as Ryan laid out, was a timeline that makes it certainly impossible for all of this to be decided before the Republican convention, start to get into a fall timeline. And then at that point, the Republican Party wouldn't have, perhaps a viable candidate if he was convicted of a crime. So I think there'd be a lot of the country that would look at that as completely unfair, even if they accepted a jury verdict against Trump. We're getting to the point where the Supreme Court has, given Trump basically a free pass on these charges effectively, because the likelihood that he could have a trial and be convicted before an election seems very minimal at this point. If he gets elected, he, of course, has the ability to pardon himself. In fact, the Justice Department has guidance that says you can't prosecute a sitting president. So the Justice Department might withdraw.
Yeah, let's talk about, I guess, first the GOP nomination process. I mean, there had been a chance this trial for the case could happen before Election Day. That's looking less likely. So how does that now change the campaigns for both Trump and opponent Nikki Haley? I mean, if one of her selling points is that she's the candidate free of legal problems, well, now if she doesn't do well on Super Tuesday, could she have to bow out of the race?
She only has to bow out of the race when she doesn't have money to fly her plane anymore, or to get on a plane, or to have hotel rooms. But the truth is, Joe, this race has been over for quite some time. I mean, without some sort of, external intervention in this race, Donald Trump is going to sew it up either Super Tuesday or perhaps mini Super Tuesday shortly following that. I think Nikki Haley, one of the reasons to hang around is to pick up delegates in case Trump became not viable through trial. Obviously, to your point, or to the point of the question, that possibility has been removed. Donald, the Republican convention will happen before any trial.
And John, real quickly, let's look at Capitol Hill, because there's actually talk that Democrats could do something pretty extreme if the Supreme Court rules in favor of Trump in this presidential immunity case. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats have tried to pull out all the stops and are looking at ways of shutting down government processes, or stripping the Supreme Court of funding, all kinds of measures that they might undertake to try to get in the way of it. It's hard to see that working, especially for a party that is talking about the rule of law to suddenly turn on the Supreme Court. It makes their election arguments, sort of in conflict with each other.
All right, John Allen, good to have you with us this morning. Thank you as always. Right now, fire crews in Texas are battling as many as 23 wildfires that are raging across the state. At least one person has died, and so far more than 1 million acres have already burned, with dry conditions and high winds fanning the flames. One of the fires, called the Smokehouse Creek Fire north of Amarillo, has scorched 850,000 acres so far. That's bigger than the state of Rhode Island, making it the second largest wildfire in Texas history. Many residents in the path of the fire have been forced to evacuate. Several roadways are shut down. Governor Abbott issued a disaster declaration for 60 counties impacted by those fires. From fire to cold temps, let's get a check on your morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Angie Lastman tracking some of the cold weather on the way. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. We've got the chill in the air for sure across portions of the country that over the past couple of days have been dealing with some milder conditions. Not the case this morning, but don't worry, more warmth is on the way for the center of the country. Let's start for the Northeast, though. You're waking up to temperatures much chillier than what you probably went to bed with. We've got conditions ending up just into the upper 30s for Pittsburgh later today. 40s for New York, upper 40s for Washington, D.C., and those numbers are pretty close to where they should be for this time of year. But of course, a couple of spots a little cooler than normal and definitely cooler than what we were seeing yesterday and even the day before that. As we look a little farther to the west, notice across portions of the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Plains, we're going to be running way warm once again. We saw a bit of a dip in temperatures as yesterday's front worked through places like, say, Chicago, where we were just into the 20s for our high. And as we get into tomorrow, 50s it will be for folks in Chicago. We'll see some 60s across parts of Kansas, Missouri, St. Louis, and Kansas City ending up at 60 degrees. Even Minneapolis is going to be running way above normal with temperatures back into the upper 50s. And you can see it does spread into portions of the Northeast and New England area with upper 40s and upper 50s across that region. That's as we get into tomorrow. But look at this roller coaster ride that we once again are on when it comes to temperatures as we get into the weekend. We'll see places like Cincinnati get into the 60s on Saturday. We're into the 70s on Sunday, and we're not done warming up there. By Monday, we're dealing with mid-70s for Cincinnati, for Nashville, upper 70s for places like St. Louis. Even Chicago will be back to the 70s after dealing with the 20s for the high yesterday. So if you don't like the weather, just wait a couple of days, I suppose. That's the forecast up and down the East Coast, too. New York ends up into the upper 50s for Sunday and Monday, and we'll see this roller coaster ride continue. As we wrap up February, of course, today's the last day. We get into March tomorrow, but check out the record warmth that we saw coast to coast. 92% of the lower 48 saw warmer than normal temperatures for the month of February, and dozens of cities saw temperatures well above normal and recorded the warmest February ever on record. You've got places like Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Chicago, all included in that, as far south as Little Rock. So February was not normal. It was quite warm, and you can see places like Fargo and Grand Forks running 15 degrees above normal for this time of year for the month of February. So we'll see what happens in March. In the meantime, as we head through the day today, parts of the southern plains picking up some rain. You can see stretch from Texas to Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, even into Mississippi. Some spots that are going to pick up some rain are areas that have been dealing with those wildfires that we've told you about. So some much needed rain for folks there. And then we really ramp up the rainfall across the southeast tomorrow. We'll see a bit of a wintry mix across parts of the Appalachians. So heads up there, could be a little slick on the roads as you get out for your Friday. And that'll last into the evening hours, too. Rainfall amounts anywhere from about a half an inch to an inch, maybe isolated spots across the Carolinas, the coastal regions, that is, could see up to 2 inches. And that'll leave you with a soggy finish to your work week. Now, out west, a different story. Winter in full effect, and we could be seeing the strongest winter storm of the season for folks across parts of the mountain regions there. We've got the winter alerts to prove it. We're going to see blizzard conditions in some spots. And notice we're already dealing with the rain and the snow across portions of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Now, the heavy snow will really start to ramp up here as we get through the day today. But it's not just the snow. It's the winds. It's the decreased visibility. It's the really slick conditions, and not just at the high elevations. We're going to see pretty impressive snowfall rates. 1 to 2 inches per hour is likely across parts of the Sierra range, but we could see up to 3 to 5 inches per hour. This is going to be, like I said, the strongest of the season, Joe, and it's going to pack a punch for folks there. We could see 5 to 10 feet of snow. It's good, because we, of course, need it as we're running well well below normal for the snowpack this season. But we're going to need to, of course, have to. We're gonna need that when summer comes around. So they've got to deal with the impacts today.
Exactly. Take it now. All right, Angie, thank you so much. Today, Texas will be the scene of a different kind of dueling visits made by both former President Trump and the current President Joe Biden. Both are heading to the Lone Star State to discuss the situation at the southern border. It's a chance for both men to lay out their policy plans for what's going to be one of the biggest issues of the 2024 election. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Brownsville, Texas, where President Biden is expected to be this afternoon. So, Jay, what can we expect from his visit? What's his message?
Yeah, and Joe, it's the second visit of President Biden to the southern border since taking office. The White House says that he will meet with Border Patrol agents along with local officials, get some feedback on the current situation along the border. But he's also here to ratchet up more pressure on congressional Republicans to move on bipartisan border security measures. There's been a back and forth on Capitol Hill and between the White House on getting something done here. He will lay out what he believes is the fastest way to ease tensions and problems along the border and looking for an audience that may indeed step up a push to get something done in Washington.
So, Jay, Trump is set to deliver his remarks in Eagle Pass. It's about 330 miles away from where you are right now. I assume that will be a different visit, a different tone, right?
Yeah, no question, Joe. He's about, as you said, 300 miles or so away up the Rio Grande Valley. The border issue has been a primary part of his campaign, a focus along the campaign trail. And to give you an idea of how he may address things here overnight, he released a campaign video on social media linking a recent murder, that Georgia nursing student, Laken Riley, killed by a migrant, saying that it's linked to what he calls President Biden's and the administration's, quote, open border policy. So he is on full attack as he comes here to Texas.
And, Jay, while we have you, we have the results of President Biden's annual physical, which happened yesterday. I mean, polls tell us his age and his health are a major concern, a major issue for voters. So what are we hearing from his doctor?
Yeah. Yes, doctor says, and I'm quoting here, that he is fit for duty. You're right. The president's health has been under scrutiny and continues to be. Both of these men up in their years, so there are a lot of questions about their ability to serve. The physician says that the president shows no evidence of mental or physical issues. And quoting again here, he fully executes all of his responsibilities without any exemptions or accommodations. So a clean bill of health, Joe.
All right, Jay Gray, thank you so much. Today on Capitol Hill, the House is set to vote on a short-term bill that would avert a partial government shutdown this week. The stopgap deal was announced yesterday by lawmakers. It would fund federal agencies into March. If passed through Congress, the deal would buy lawmakers more time to pass a longer-term funding bill down the road. Now, this deal comes hours after Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell shocked the political world, announcing he'll step down as leader of Senate Republicans later this year. That'll bring to an end his time as the longest-serving leader in Senate history. A lot to cover. Let's bring in NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake in Washington. So let's start with the stopgap measure agreed to by bipartisan negotiators. Tell us about it. How likely is it this is going to get through Congress by the end of tomorrow to avoid that partial shutdown?
Yeah, Joe, this is an extension of the extension that lawmakers gave themselves earlier this year to finish their work. The hope on a bipartisan basis is that this will be enough time, with one additional week to fund about half the government and then a couple more weeks after that to fund the second half, for lawmakers to finish these funding bills and fund the government through the rest of this fiscal year. So that would be all the way out through September. This is the plan. All the leaders are on board. But with this Congress and the number of votes it would take to get this all across the finish line, I think we have to wait and see where the votes are before we know for sure we're not going to kind of accidentally wander into a shutdown sometime over the next month.
So yesterday was busy enough on Capitol Hill, and then came this surprising news: Mitch McConnell stepping down as Senate leader. He's been the GOP leader since 2007. What are we learning about why he's stepping down now?
Yeah, the longest-serving leader of either party in congressional history, and he's been in the Senate longer than I've been alive, Joe. I think the factors here are a couple of fold. First, we've seen both his political strength and his physical strength fading a little bit over the last couple of years. Remember, he had those freezing incidents in the Capitol last year after recovering from a concussion. Also, the party has just been moving in a different direction, away from his brand of conservatism and towards a more Trump brand of republicanism. Also, McConnell suffered the death of his sister-in-law a few weeks ago ago, and that seemed to have crystallized some of his thinking about his legacy, which he discussed a little bit on the floor yesterday. Listen.
I always imagined a moment when I have total clarity and peace about the sunset of my work. A moment when I'm certain I have helped preserve the ideals I so strongly believe. That day arrived today.
So, Joe, I think while the idea that McConnell was eventually going to hang it up, he is 82 years old, is not particularly surprising. The suddenness of this yesterday caught basically everyone in Capitol Hill off guard. It was a shocking moment in a chamber where those are few and far between. So
you talked about the fact that the party's sort of been moving away from his style. That begs the question, who could be in the running to take over for McConnell once he steps down?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the three frontrunners, and people will get used to hearing this, are the three GOP Johns. John Thune from South Dakota, who's the current Senate number 2. John Cornyn from Texas, who was the Senate Republican number 2 before him. And John Barrasso from Wyoming, who's the current number 3, but probably the closest to the MAGA base of the party of those three men. This is an election that will happen behind closed doors of just Republican senators after a new class gets elected in November. Probably the most important election with the smallest constituency of anything happening in the country this year, Joe.
All right, three Johns. That could make it both easy and also perhaps confusing.
That's right.
Garrett Haake, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.